active on record in the state's history. For NPR News, I'm Jane Vaughn in Ashland, Oregon.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. After a nearly 50-year career with the National Park Service, the chief executive of the Castillo de San Marcos and Fort Matanzas National Monuments in St. Augustine has retired. After working as a park ranger in St. Augustine from 1978 to 1980, Gordon Wilson came back to the city to serve as the superintendent of the two national monuments in 1992. From the beginning, Wilson says he was attracted to the National Park Service's efforts to maintain important historical and natural resources for future generations.
We take care of them, and we give the visitor an experience and a chance to enjoy it and understand why it's important.
After working for more than 30 years in St. Augustine, Wilson says he's looking forward to using his retirement as an opportunity to travel. The National Park Service has not yet hired a replacement superintendent for the two national monuments. It appears the Immigration Detention Center in Baker County is now open. News partners at News4 Jax report the first 117 detainees arrived at the facility in Northeast Florida last Tuesday. And the only public notice the Baker County facility had begun operations came when Governor Ron DeSantis made an announcement on Fox News last week. The state's third detention center is now under construction in Northwest Florida. Have the umbrella for the next couple of days in Northeast Florida. Heavy downpours and some strong storms are expected. Highs reach the low to mid 80s this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Focus Features, presenting Downton Abbey, the grand finale. Concluding the story of the Crawley family, this motion picture event can be experienced in theaters this Friday. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the decline of Florida's oyster population set to music. We talked to an anthropology professor hoping to convey the enormity of climate risk through student compositions. Later in the program, what the Jags' triumph over the Carolina Panthers says about the season to come. But first, if you were choosing a soundtrack for the apocalypse, soft jazz might not be your first thought, but it is the sound created by students working to communicate the immense threats from climate change. Here to tell us about it is Heather O'Leary, assistant professor of anthropology at the University of South Florida. She joins us via video. Good morning, Dr. O'Leary.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here this morning. Can you explain to us, how did this project begin in the first place?
Sure. So Oysters Ain't Safe is the latest of our crescendo group. We have been taking 3 different types of data inspired by the United Nations triple bottom line, which bring together people, planet, and prosperity. So when we're thinking about oyster decline, we can't just think about it as solely oysters. We have to think about it through using lots of different disciplines in a university, but also communicating with a public who may not want to come over to my office in the middle of their weekend to look at my boring data.
So you call it boring data. It is, very critical data that you study. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, the work that you've done looking at the environmental metrics, things that are telling us how the environment is doing, particularly something like the oyster population.
So in terms of the oyster composition, we looked at Florida Fish and Wildlife data for the past 40 years that were showing us the average price per pound for oysters, the number of times that vessels went out to collect oysters, and the pounds that they reported gathering and catching. And so this longitudinal data was telling a story about the oyster decline on Florida's west coast, one that a lot of different people have experienced in their real lives. We paired that with some data that I gathered from a NOAA survey through their community project funding program, Tampa Bay Surveillance, where we're looking at oysters and also fish and how much emergent contaminants of concern are affecting them. There's a science side, but then there's also the really important public perception side. So the folks that are making seafood decisions for themselves and for their vulnerable families every day, figuring out whether or not we think that our seafood is safe enough to eat was important. One thing that I had no idea would come out of some of these surveys is that there were so many people who also advocated for the safety of the oysters themselves.
I do want to get into some of the oyster information that we do have and, the Appalachia-Cola Bay area, but I think it's important to kind of let people know what we're talking about in terms of the musical creation, because that is what this project is, the Crescendo project that you're talking about. And it's something that you created in an interdisciplinary way. You're an anthropologist, but the students that you're working with on these compositions are music students, and the information that their music is designed to convey is kind of environmental science. So explain how all of that came together in the first place.
So, anthropology is fundamentally about being able to translate. What does it mean to be human across space and across time? And something that really shocked me about many of our students, even though many of them have grown up in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, many of them haven't been on dives or harvested oysters on their own. And so, as we think about what it is like to live on a coast and sometimes consume seafood, but be separated from the gathering and preparation of that seafood, I think it's really interesting. So, not only were we trying to talk as faculty across our different disciplines, but we were also trying to get a pan-university discussion going where our marine scientist students could talk to the student composers who were forced to ask questions about, well, what kind of sounds would I think of when I'm dreaming up stony coral tissue loss disease, which is very percussion heavy because of all of the things that are eating into the coral in a coral reef. Normally, if you're diving, you can hear that. And then you can compare that to the kind of funky saxophone noises of red tide when there are all sorts of sea creatures that are washing up on the beach and you can smell it from miles away.
Mm.
Or you can think about the kind of funky jazz tunes that represent the Great Gatsby eras of the roaring 20s, overconsumption, everybody's drinking champagne out of their little glasses. But also in terms of thinking about it, jazz becomes very important when you think about the culture of the Gulf, thinking about the way communities speak to one another and spread those messages beyond their fishing villages, et cetera.
So let's start. I want to play a little bit of one of the earlier projects that you did in this crescendo process. And it was performed with a band and a wind ensemble. It's something that's called Sanctuary and Flow. And as you said, it kind of is something that is describing red tide and impacts on coral reefs. Let's just take a little listen to it. So there's a lot of sounds that we're hearing there. Are these sounds that the students themselves are scoring and coming up with? Are they working with you to come up with what something might sound like? Explain to us how this actually translates from the information that you've collected or that the students have found into something that's audible.
So there's lots of different types of composing. Some is more subjective. You're thinking about the way a red tide might make you feel. And so it's like poetry. You're choosing the musical notes that are important in different ways. What we do is sonification, data-driven sonification. And so we try and have a 1-to-1 ratio between the data changing and the sounds that you'll hear, so that this doesn't just become a song to convey something, but the students are truly learning how to do data literacy. And so they are grappling with the data in ways that they don't typically as music students. And the marine scientists are thinking about their own experiences through the power of music. And it's in these conversations that happen that we can really see patterns in data in different ways. So while I might be in the room, and same with Matt McCutcheon in music, we might be in the room to help guide conversation. But truly, this is all student run. And that band that you heard is also students. We thought that it would be a great start to start with symphonic band so that all of the K-12 schools, not just in Florida, but around the Gulf and around America, could request the sheet music and give it a try to play the data.
Explain what sonification is, if you can, at the kind of the most basic level.
Yeah, that's great. So, an easy way of thinking of sonification, many of us have been to a store on like our main street. Or when I started to get interested in this, I was doing my field work in India, where I've been doing ethnographic field work on water for the past 20 years. Just like when you go into Main Street, when you go into a temple, you ring a bell. So you open the door and a bell rings. If you were sitting down and not even watching people come in and out of these buildings, if you recorded that sound, you would have a picture of how busy the day was. It might also tell you a little bit about how much money the business made. Maybe it also has some cross indications with the weather that day. And so we can take some of these sounds to teach our ears what kinds of numerical data would be on a spreadsheet. And the thing that I like about sonification the most is, when I take my small child to a musical concert, she's feeling with her body all of the different things that are being conveyed by that music without having to be able to read music. And it sort of feels similar when we're thinking about the scientific data. Do you need advanced math? I mean, if you're looking at the data that I'm looking at every day, you sure do. But everyday people who are hearing can listen to it. And we also have traveling artistic galleries that go around with student and community artists who have taken the data and again, tried to translate one-to-one. What does this data look like when it changes? Can we modulate the texture of what we're doing? Can we change the color a little bit? How can we use our artistic and visual values for universal design so that no matter who you are, you're sort of getting a sense of what's happening right beneath our noses on the water?
If you're just joining us, we were talking to Dr. Heather O'Leary about her project, Making Music as a Warning About Climate Change. You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. Dr. O'Leary, so you're using musical parameters to convey this data, things like pitch, volume, timbre, but who is assigning sounds to those pieces of data? And what are the pieces of data that you're deciding to input? I mean, you must have an enormous amount of data. So how do you decide what kinds of data you're going to use?
Sure. So in the Oyster song specifically, we were using the Florida Fish and Wildlife 40-year record for oyster hauls on the west coast of Florida. We were looking at the average price per pound. We were looking at the number of trips that vessels were making out onto the water and the number of pounds that each vessel was reporting. We were taking those two pieces of economic and ecological, and we were combining it with some of the surveys that we got from the Tampa Bay Surveillance Project, which is funded by NOAA's Community Project Funding Program. And in those surveys, we developed the lyrics. So right now, if you take a chance to listen to the MIDI file, the soft jazz kind of cheesy tone, you can hear parts of the data, but it won't be until the piece is finally played in its world premiere at USF that you'll be able to also hear the lyrics, which were drawn specifically from those surveys.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a little listen because this is a kind of a funny, a little cheesy jazz number. Let's take a listen to the Oysters Ain't Safe song. So again, that's the sonification of this project. The song is called Oysters Ain't Safe. This will actually be performed in January. Is that right? With a live performance?
That's right.
Yeah. And
Here at
so,
USF.
right. And so the song is about oysters, has kind of a dual meaning. I mean, in some cases, oysters are not safe to eat because of the things that they filter and the pollutants in water. Oysters themselves are also not safe in a lot of ways because they have been collapsing, particularly on the Gulf Coast of Florida. The whole oyster industry, but also oyster reefs. What is the current threat? Explain to us um, what is happening on the Gulf Coast to the oyster industry and the population.
So we have to think about it in the three different ways. We have to think about it from a people, profit, or people, prosperity, planet perspective. Without these three things, we can't have sustainable ecological systems. And so we have to think, okay, well, planet-wise, with ocean acidification, that doesn't really harm the adult oysters as much as it harms their little babies, who have much smaller shells and have to float around for a while until they can anchor themselves on some place to grow. Again, from the like physical biogeochemical perspective, we have a much different amount of water flowing in from river systems. So especially Apalachicola Bay, which used to provide between 10 to 20% of the nation's oysters and were lauded as some of the tastiest on the market, they experienced a lot of difficulty with their hauls and their harvests because oysters just love to be in brackish water. So they need a good mix of both seawater and also the fresh water coming from the river systems. And so when you have urbanization upriver or more damming in order to control the flow of the river, what sometimes happens when you're at the bottom of the pipeline is you don't get enough water to protect some of the interests like the oyster industry.
Yeah, and we
Now,
know. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say we know that the Apalachicola Bay is kind of at the back end of a water system that begins in Georgia, and there's been a lot of battles over the years about how much water is flowing into the bay and whether it's sufficient.
Yeah, several years ago when I worked on an OECD and Global Water Partnership report that was presented to heads of state at the World Water Forum. In that report, we had to choose the 32 biggest hotspots for looking at these issues, and Appalachia Aquifer and Bay, that came to one of the top of our lists. So it's really incredible that we've got some of these issues operating right under our noses. Many Floridians might not know and understand the impacts that upstream river systems can have on our own local economies.
We do know that there's, in addition to water supply, there's, threats from climate change in terms of, the temperatures of the water, weather events that are connected to a warming planet, pollutants in the water. All of that led to really the wholesale collapse of that Apalachicola Bay oystery, I guess you'd call it, or the reef system there. And they basically suspended harvesting oysters from that area for, I believe it was 5 years back in 2020. Is that right?
That's right. I think that they are due to open up in 2026.
Yeah, and so that is happening with some optimism that the system there has recovered enough to allow for recreational to some degree, and again, kind of restaurants to collect oysters there to sell, and a lot of people are looking forward to that. But not everybody's sure that it's healthy enough to sustain a reopening. Have you any sense as to whether it's going to be able to bounce back after this 5-year hiatus?
I do not have a crystal ball,
Mhm.
but I am an optimist. So I'm hoping that as we move forward with opening some of these sanctuaries, that Apalachicola Bay follows some of the other oyster population bounce backs that we've seen in other areas of the nation. So I'm hoping that we end up being another success story. But as an anthropologist, I also know the power of culture. I know the power of communities talking together. And when communities are able to participate with policymakers, decision makers at whatever scale they can, we end up having a much richer way of modeling. So that's I think one of the biggest threats to science right now is that without good science communication, talking to people in communities, and the second half of that science communication, which a lot of people forget, being good listeners in order to take the everyday expertise of people who might not have a science degree, but know that water even better than any scientist ever could. It's in taking into account their instructions, their observations, and their gut feelings that we can start to build better models in order to inform the policy so that we don't make errors like opening up systems too fast or for even more haulage than we think is possible. So it's really delicate to manage fisheries and natural wild spaces. But the more we are able to talk together, the better. And I think that programs like NPR and public media allow us to have those community conversations. Right now, you guys listen to the Oyster music and hopefully heard some patterns and would love to tell me more about those patterns so I can make better scientific models.
You mentioned optimism, and I've seen you in another interview talking about radical optimism. Can you sort of explain why you think that's important in the field that you're working in, and how kind of opening the conversation, opening the door for people to engage with some of these difficult pieces of information, difficult science, why that's important?
Absolutely. So being an interdisciplinary scientist means that you're not just having your ears buried below water all the time, but that you're also being able to listen and see things from other people's point of view. Dr. Catherine Wilkins here at USF is the one who introduced me to the concept of radical optimism. And essentially, this is to say that we can't just be overwhelmed all the time by some of the more dour news about the environment. And if the only time that we're talking about the environment is in this like very somber, nervous, pessimistic way, people will tune out. And so another thing that we can think about is Martha Beck and other folks who think about how the antidote to anxiety is creativity. And as an anthropologist, I would also add it's creativity together. So it's in these moments where we think about playing with the data and making it into colors and shapes and figuring out which kind of instrument sort of sums up what's happening there. You don't have to have a music degree. You don't have to be the world's best artist, but it's in those moments of play that we can absorb some of the information in ways that we can become better actors and agents to build the world that we want to see.
Tell me a little bit about what science diplomacy is.
So essentially, science, when it exists in a vacuum, it's not very effective. So when we try and be science communicators, we're trying to help the world know and understand what we've learned. When it comes to science diplomacy, it's reaching across barriers and saying, let's work together. So when I've been tasked with being the representative of anthropology on the International Science Council, the ISC, and going to the United Nations first water conference of my entire life. They hadn't had one in like 30, 40 years. And so when I went to the United Nations, it's not just about sort of communicating, this is what science thinks, this is what science thinks, but it's also being a great listener and thinking about our policy makers and what they need to be able to help the folks who are affected by these things be more balanced. It makes me think about specifically Dr. Sergio Alvarez from University of Central Florida and I and our team. We worked on a couple of papers and we determined with another one of these red tide crescendo songs, we determined that the cost of the 2017 to 2019 red tide bloom here in Florida cost $2.7 billion. And that number could have just lived in an archive forever. But we had been talking to our policy and decision makers and Florida families who said, you know, we would love to have money for relief when a red tide is coming, or even for prevention and information systems to manage some of our marine threats. If science is operating just for general truth, then we're not actually being good science diplomats, because we really need to reach out to the folks who need to use that information in order to change policies to keep Floridians and Americans safer.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the money for the Apalachicola Bay restoration project actually comes from the Deepwater Horizon BP oil spill fund, which obviously had enormous impacts on the Gulf and continues to. Um, what are your students getting out of this project?
I think that my students, when they come to me, joy brimming out of their eyes, saying, I experimented with more music last night, and actually I learned more about this one port and how much seafood they brought in. That makes me very excited. That's much different than the kinds of faces that I used to see coming in, which were more serious and academic. They're learning the same thing. They're learning it in a robust way, but through that kind of joyful play and experimentation, we are preparing them for a world where they learn how to be a little bit more nimble, take more creative risks, and to think about problems in new ways. Because if we keep thinking about the environment and our social systems and our economic systems, if we keep thinking about that using the exact same logic that we have for a long time, we're already seeing that there are some errors to those models. There's some difficulty with that thinking. So we're going to need their fresh, bright eyes and their confidence in themselves that they can interpret data no matter what the medium.
Well, Dr. Heather O'Leary, it is a really neat project. We appreciate you coming on and telling us about it. She is a professor of anthropology at the University of South Florida, and her project is called Crescendo. Dr. O'Leary, thank you so much for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, more than 2 years after the launch of a national 24/7 crisis hotline, we talked to the local operators of 988 about the evolving need on the First Coast. Welcome back. This 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline celebrated its 3rd anniversary in July. Here to tell us about how it started and how it's going is Coretta Hill, Chief Operating Officer for United Way of Northeast Florida. Coretta, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Ann?
Very good. Thank you for being here. We're also
for having
joined
us.
by Jason Kimmins. He is the 988 Training and Operations Supervisor here. Jason, good morning.
Good morning. So good to be here.
It's so great to have you. So, Coretta, you oversee both the 211 and the 988 functions
That's correct.
of the call centers. Those are both managed by United Way.
Absolutely.
Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about how the 988 project is going. As we mentioned, it's a 24/7 crisis hotline, but
Yes.
you've always done that to some extent.
We have. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And as mentioned, first it's 988 Day. So I have to say September 8th. And we are very, I would say, excited to be able to share even more about this critical resource that is very important to our community. And 2 years ago, really going, back as far as 2022, really, we have and in the past had always operated the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that support has been 24/7 for many, many years. It has been previously operated by our 211 call center. Thanks to the great support and the advocacy that happened over the country, federal advocacy and dollars that really helped to expand around the country, the expansion of 988 to a 3-digit number, that number being just as easy to remember as a 211 for financial crisis, 988 for emotional and mental health crisis. And At United Way, we are an organization that envisions a community of opportunity that has hope. And that key word is hope. That hope oftentimes is not available when people are in need of financial support. And it's absolutely not available when people are in need of mental health and have emotional crisis as well. I often see mental health. I say this, and we believe that mental health is economic health because when you are emotionally and mentally well, you're able to take care of your family. You're able to have a vital, a kind of well-rounded community or serve your community, and you also, as youth, you feel more supported, and that is what 988 is intended to do, to be that caring handoff, that caring support to provide individuals who are just as in need of financial as much as they are, or mental and emotional wellness as they are in financial crisis.
And so since the 988 split off from the 211,
Yes.
what have you seen in terms of the response? Has the number of calls, you've gotten grown?
Yes, absolutely. So we, in 2022, again, the rollout of the 988 number, as we mentioned, easy to remember number. Since that time, we have seen an increase, year-to-year increase between 20 to 25% over year to year. Just last year alone, we had approximately 30 to 40 calls from individuals every day. We also, that averages approximately 1,100 calls a month. And that has, again, just last year alone, given us an increase of about 20% in volume. What I would also like to add is that not only has the volume of calls increased, though, but our answer rate has increased as well. When we are starting anything new, rolling it out, it takes time to build the infrastructure, to build the team. As I mentioned, we had a dedicated staff, a whole team of 211 providers who were taking financial crisis calls and emotional stress calls. So it took some time to build the team that we have now. And over the last 2 years, we've been able to do that very, very well. The first few months, and I would say the first year of inception, with a small team, we had an answer rate of less than 70%. We are very, very pleased that this team, this really dedicated team led by Jason, now has an 86% answer rate. And we are working to continue to increase that. That allows.
What happens? I'm sorry, when you say an
Yes.
answer rate, so what happens to the calls that are not answered?
That's a great question. So every call
Yes.
and every caller reaching out to the helpline is going to get help.
Yes.
So the percentage that's outside of the 86 rolls up to the national backup.
Gotcha.
But what's important about answering locally is that we want to have that local response where we can support someone in the community themselves and get linked like through a warm handoff to higher levels of care if they, the helper needs that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one thing we always hear about, Jason, is the shortage of, for instance, beds, of availabilities when people have a crisis and they need to go to somewhere on an emergency basis. So when you're doing those handoffs, how are you able to do that in that environment? Are you also seeing when people need help that there isn't a place for them to go?
Yeah, that can really be the case. We know that mental health care is always kind of underfunded, and there's more need than ever for additional resources. But what's important about the service that we provide is that if there isn't something that's available for them, we can work and walk alongside a person in crisis to find something that can help them, live another day.
Yeah. And so what kinds of calls do you get, and how do you train people to receive someone in that state of distress?
So every call is just as unique as each individual person is. But, in general, there is calls that people are impacted, financially, lost their job, people who in breakups, people just in general having emotional crisis in that moment. We see that, there's a lot of different types. I can't name them all in this one.
Well,
But
Yes, go. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Jason.
But I will say, you asked a little bit about the training that we provide. All of our crisis specialists are 100% suicide first aid responders through a 20-hour certification course. In addition to that, there is a national standards of training that is required. At our 988 center, we include different modalities of training, which include role plays, live observation of calls, self-paced learning, and I think one of the most important things is evaluations throughout the entire training process. We will never put someone on the line that is not ready.
Right.
And if I could just interject to really just add to what Jason said, one of the questions in terms of the calls and who's coming in, I think anyone who is in need of support, I shared this earlier, is when you are you have an ache in your back or your foot, or your leg or anywhere in your body. Oftentimes, we find it pretty easy to seek appointments with our doctor or medical facility or someone, a doctor's office. But we want to make sure that the stigma of mental health and mental wellness is just as open, that we are providing the system of care that gives people, everyone, the ability to feel safe, that it's okay to call and to call this number, and that there is a live person here locally in our community taking those calls to welcome them on the other end.
Well, there's a live person taking calls here, too. We've got a call from John in Riverside. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Good morning. There was a very popular song about the suicide of a young man called "The Ode to Billy Joe." It was such a popular song. There was the reason he committed suicide was a mystery in the song, which made it very haunting. They decided to make a movie of this song, and they needed a reason for Billy Joe to have committed suicide. The reason they came up with was unrelated to the song, unrelated to the plot of the movie. The boy went to the county fair where he got hopelessly drunk and had a homosexual relationship. The depiction of the movie, he was beyond any point of consent. But the stigma of having had homosexual relationship required him to jump off the Tallahatchie Bridge and commit suicide. Now I hear that they're taking the LGBT option, push free for LGBT off this hotline. We're going back to the days when the message to gay people like myself was go ahead and do the right thing and kill yourself. Taking this option off the list is going to kill troubled children, most of whom will probably be gay or transsexual. Some of them will just be going through a troubled time. But it's unconscionable that, you cannot imagine what talking to a straight person about being gay can be like. Straight people can be incredibly stupid and insensitive about it. And they needed that option. Taking it away will kill children.
John, thanks very much for your call. Jason, we've only got about 30 seconds left. Can you address that, please?
Yes. It's definitely an unfortunate situation. But I will say that everyone who answers the phone, as we spoke a little bit earlier, the training goes through cultural competency trainings. It's important that everyone that gets into the line is met with respect and no judgment, and that is the type of help that you will receive when you reach out to the 988 Florida Lifeline.
Well, it is a reminder of just how important that service is. Coretta, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it. It's 988 if anybody is in crisis.
Yes, dial 988. It's just that simple.
All right.
Ann.
Coretta Hill, Jason Kimmins, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, lightning strikes at least once for the Jaguars. We get post-game analysis from Alessandra Pombrian. Welcome back. Well, an hour-long rain delay didn't dampen hopes for Jags fans in their first regular season matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Here to tell us about what to take away from the victory is Alessandra Pombrian, sportscaster at WJXT News for Jags. Nice to have you back, Alessandra.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited that the season is here and that we get to talk about Jaguars football for another season.
I mean, how was your off season, first of all? It's been a minute since you've been on the show.
Yeah, it was good. Well, you know what? We didn't really have much of an off season just because with the firing of Doug Peterson, the hiring of Liam Coen, and then Florida men's basketball's national championship. It
You've
was
been
kind
busy.
of we've been busy.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was good. I'm happy that football is back.
So, what were you watching for in this game, and what did you see?
Yeah, I was watching for a clean game, which, I mean, there were definitely some mistakes, but putting those aside, I thought it was good. I mean, this was what Jaguars fans have been wanting, have been hoping for, and I thought it was a good game, both offense, defense, and of course, Cam Little and special teams.
There was some house cleaning that happened. We've got a lot of new faces out there. Is that net positive?
Oh, 100%. I think Liam Coen, James Gladstone, the general manager, Tony Baselli, EVP, I think they're doing such a good job just changing not only the culture of this team, but of the entire organization. You can feel it when you enter that building. It's not kind of depressing anymore. At the end of last season, there was like the vibe in the locker room and in the facility, like it's doomed. You know, everyone knows what's coming in just a couple of days. So now there was so much positivity. People were laughing and smiling. They actually wanted to talk to us, which was a nice surprise. But it was. I was really happy for them that they got the win and that we got to talk about a victory today.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. And so this was also, I saw Trevor Lawrence's first game since December 1 and the first time he left Everbank with a victory since October 6th. That is a long time.
I know. What is that? Like 11 months, which is insane to think about. I mean, last season, we can finally put that away just because they won this one. And I thought the Panthers were going to put up a little bit more of a fight. But, I mean, starting from that opening drive to start the game, he was able to pass to a couple guys. Brenton Strange really led that kind of drive, the tight end, who's going to have probably a very big season for the Jaguars this year. Travis Hunter got his first catch, which is a 10-yard gain. So that was great to see. And yeah, he was definitely commanding of the offense. The offensive line did a phenomenal job, which I don't think we've been able to say in pretty much years. But they did such a great job. And I think the stats just came out for next gen, and he was like the least pressured quarterback, one of the least pressured quarterbacks yesterday. So that's a huge advantage and a huge thing for the offensive line.
Yeah, and people are really excited for Travis Hunter. I think that's just he brings such a novelty to the team, and so that's cool. But Trevor Lawrence also, back in the game and not showing any reluctance or hesitancy to kind of get it in there. I mean, he was sent out on a bad tackle, but he was still kind of scrambling for stuff in the game yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's kind of the same thing that you hear from offense and defense is that it's not an overly complicated scheme and they can just go out there. They know what they're trying to do and they're confident in what they're trying to do. And so they have much more of literally a confidence when they step on the field. And you saw that, especially from the start of the game. Now, in the third quarter, after halftime, there was, he didn't look great in the third quarter, obviously. Like I said, there were mistakes. Penalties were a major factor. But all in all, the Jaguars won, and we haven't been able to say that in a long time, pretty much. So, I think this is definitely was a positive game and a game that Jaguars fans should be proud of. The team should be really proud of. But of course, they need to step it up going into next week.
So what is their season looking like? I mean, we know that the Panthers aren't the greatest, opponent. I mean, they're not a great team right now. But the Jaguars were looking good. So how is the rest of their schedule?
So the first half of their schedule, besides, of course, this Panthers win, the first half of their schedule definitely is stacked with really good playoff potential teams. Their second, once they get through that and the bye week, their second half of their schedule, they could win every game. I mean, that they're fairly comparable to the Jaguars. It's not as difficult as the first half. So if they can get through this first half before the bye week and they can win a couple of these games, that's going to be great for them because I think the second half, they should be able to win most of them, if not all of them.
And so what is up next? They're in Cincinnati?
Yeah, they're going to the Bengals next. So the competition is being turned up a lot. Obviously, the Bengals are much better than the Panthers. So we'll see what they do. And it's their first away game. So under, new head coach Liam Coen. So that may be changing how they travel or, what happens when they get there. So they'll have to work through those kinks. Of course, they have the preseason, the 2 away games in the preseason that they kind of use that as a dress rehearsal. But now these games actually matter. So we'll have to see what happens next week.
They do matter. So next home game, 1 p.m. on Sunday. Alessandra, it's so fun to have you back.
I know. I'm so excited. Victory Monday. And, the Jaguars looked really good. Hopefully this can be a fun season to talk about.
All right. Well, we look forward to talking to you about it a lot more. Alessandra Pomprion, she's a sportscaster at our partner News for Jags. Thanks for being here. All right. Up next, a local event celebrating one of Hinduism's most significant festivals.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. One Jags presents Breaking Bread and Barriers, Humanity in the Age of Information, a community dinner and dialogue about social media, algorithms, and the public square. Tuesday, September 16th at 6 p.m. at WJCT Studios. Details and registration at onejax.org.
Let's talk trees. Northeast Florida is losing tree cover, according to a recent state report. Join us September 17th for Adapt State of the Canopy, a discussion with local officials about their response to the report. Register to join us for this free event at wjct.org/events.
Over the last quarter century, autism rates have risen dramatically, but there's still no conclusive evidence about why. Still, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he has the answer.
We will have announcements as promised in September. We're finding certain interventions now that are clearly, almost certainly causing autism.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Political battles over public health are reaching new levels. Florida is set to become the first state to eliminate all vaccine mandates, including for school children. It's a public health practice experts say has long helped curb the spread of infectious diseases. The political polarization of health policy nationwide and what it means for our democracy. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. An annual festival celebrating Indian culture through traditional dance returns to Jacksonville this week. Here to tell us about this year's Navratri celebration is organizer Vijay Patel with Jax Indian Events. Good morning, Vijay. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning.
And we're also joined by Hemant Patel, a committee member with the group. Good morning, Hemant.
Good morning.
So this is an event that we've talked about on this program before, but remind us what it's celebrating. This is a major celebration. It's a major Hindu holiday. What is it all about?
So Navratri is a major Hindu festival celebrated over 9 nights in India and honoring the divine energy to worshiping the goddess Durga. And in a various form, it is time for spiritual reflection, music, and dance.
Yeah. And you actually brought a shrine to Durga, which is the goddess that's kind of at the center of this. So it's celebrated over 9 nights, and then it's sort of the 10th day is this dance event. Is that right?
Yeah. So we do the traditional dance we call Garba. It's a traditional folk dance from India, and we do that every 9 nights.
Okay.
And we're doing this in Jacksonville on September 13th.
All right. And this is something that you do each year. You celebrate, as we said. Vijay, who is this event for in the community? I mean, we know that there is a large and growing Indian population in the First Coast area, but who else invited?
Every person in Jacksonville, all communities we invited in Jacksonville.
Yeah. And so what will they, if they're coming to it, what should they expect? How do they dress? What should they know in order to come and have a good time?
So they're wearing an Indian traditional dress.
Mhm.
All the women's are and the men's are.
Hmm. And is that for people inside and outside of Indian culture, or if people don't perhaps have that in their closet, should they be trying to find something to wear that's appropriate?
Yeah, that's fine. They can find something appropriate.
Yeah, and I would like to add this, add that it's not limited to people just from Indian heritage. It's for everybody.
Mhm.
Garba is simple, joyful, and brings a lot of energy in people. This is the one way to bring the community together. I would like to invite everybody in Jacksonville, regardless of culture, try something fun. It's new. Learn about the Indian tradition and music and dance. Experience the vibrancy of the community spirit. So it's for every culture, not just for the Hinduism.
There's also a real draw at this one because you guys have a superstar of Bollywood that's
Yep.
coming. Tell us about her and kind of what her global reputation is.
Yeah, so this year we're bringing Bhumi Trivedi. She's one of the famous playback singer in Bollywood. She's also a famous Garba singer. So we're bringing her this year to do a live singing. We're expecting almost 2,000 people at the Prime Osborne Center. So we're expecting to have a great event. We invited some of the well-known people in the community, as well as the mayor might be possibly coming to
fun.
our event. So we're very excited about the event.
And she is known as the queen of Garba, Bhumi Trivedi. But one of the reasons that your event is when it is because she's really on a national, even a global tour of these events around the country.
Right. So typically, these singers, they go around the globe for the event. She's here in U.S. right now. I think she's doing 10 or 12 different cities, she's performing at. And Jacksonville is one of them. So she's very well known among all those Garba artists.
Yeah. And so in addition to dance, are there other things that the event offers? Is there food? Tell us about the alcohol situation, because I'm not sure if that's something.
So there is no alcohol
Okay, good to know.
since this is a spiritual event. But yeah, there will be food, vendors, and then we have different vendors, different businesses that we help them to promote their business. They will be setting up their booth and selling some products, whatever they are promoting for their business. So there's going to be plenty of stuff to do it. I would say this event will, basically bridge the connection for everybody, for children to learn about the tradition, for all the adults to share their stories, and for the community to come together.
Yeah. And Vijay, this is an event. It starts at 7 on Saturday the 18th, but it kind of goes until whenever, right? There's no end time.
Until 12:30 a.m.
12:30. Okay, it does have an end time. All right, but it is a festival, family friendly. Kids are welcome.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Vijay Patel, Hemant Patel, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Well, thank you for having us, and I want to thank you specifically to WJCT for allowing us to come here. We'd also like to thank you, the city of Jacksonville, for providing the beautiful venue at the Prime Osborne and the mayor's office. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great event. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have feedback or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight or find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett, and our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. On the technical side, we're being helped out for the next few weeks by Michelle Coram and Andrew Wickman, while Brady.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.